2hollis is one of the most refreshing and creative artists to emerge recently, and the production in his albums like Boy and 2 versus his singles like Jeans and Trauma are vastly different, with the albums reaching into a diverse bag of EDM influences while also touching on some emotional subject matter, while the singles more so lean into that EDM rage fusion sound he's most known for, while often leaning towards the hype side. And I've covered 2hollis' single production in the past, so today I'm going over everything you need to know about the genius of 2hollis' album production. And this includes his upbeat EDM drum patterns, the essential synth sounds that he uses, creative effects and techniques he uses to keep his production fresh, and finally, his masterful arrangement. But before we get into the tutorial, I want to mention that literally every single sound that you hear in today's beat is from my Supernova multi-kit. This massive bundle includes 4 full kits, including a drum kit that is specially curated to make both rage and EDM, ensuring you can achieve that fusion sound without having to scour other kits. Secondly, it includes a Serum 2 bank containing all the essential synth sounds that you'll need, which are all rendered as one-shots. So you're able to tap into that sound regardless of whether or not you have Serum 2. On top of that, the bundle includes an effects bank, including Shaperbox 3 presets and Portal presets. That way you can manipulate your melodies in creative ways throughout your beats to keep things interesting. And the fourth and final kit that's included in this bundle is a study guide, including 5 FLPs and 5 raw, unedited cookup videos, so you can learn the process it takes to make these kind of beats for yourself. And this entire kit was made for making beats in the style of 2hollis, Jane Remover, Nate Sib, Kim J, just that super experimental EDM fusion kind of sound. So if you want the sounds you hear today, go ahead and check it out in the description down below. I promise you'll love it. But with all that being put aside, let's get into the first aspect of 2hollis' album production, which is his use of upbeat EDM drum patterns. And pretty much all of 2hollis' drums include these 4 components. The first of which is going to be a 4 on the floor kick pattern. Now, essentially all that means is you want your kick hitting every single time your metronome hits. So let's say your metronome is going like this.
Oh my God, bro.
You're gonna want your kick hitting. Simple stuff. The second thing that's always included is some kind of offbeat hi-hat. And to get this pattern, literally all you're gonna do is take your 4 on the floor kick pattern and move it over 2 times. The third thing included in his drums is going to be some kind of 16th note hi-hat. Now, any typical like trap hi-hat rhythm is made using 8th note hi-hats. So all you're gonna do is take a typical 2-step hi-hat pattern, duplicate it using shift and left click, and drag it to the right. And now the fourth and final thing you're going to want to include is some kind of clap or snare hitting on the 2 and the 4 of your pattern. And I say clap or snare, but you can layer both. You can use a rim shot. You can have something else in place of a clap or snare. Just something on the 2 and the 4 to give it that clap or snare like rhythm. So with that being said, this is what all 4 of those drum components sound like together. And something that I've noticed in 2hollis' album production is that he'll take each of these 4 components and disperse them throughout his beat. This not only creates variation, but also builds energy into drop sections of your beats. So for example, in this section of my beat, I start off only playing my 4 on the floor kick pattern. That's for the first 4 bars. In the next 4 bars, I introduce both a 16th note hi-hat and an offbeat hi-hat. And for the final section, I introduce both my clap and snare layer, bringing all 4 components together. Now, obviously it doesn't have to be in that particular order, but just dispersal of those 4 drum sounds can do wonders for creating energy within your beats. Though keep in mind, everything that I just said isn't set in stone, as you can use a hardstyle kick pattern instead of a 4 on the floor kick pattern, or you could do double time with your snares, or you could use an 8th note hi-hat pattern. Really just get as crazy as you want. Don't feel like you're boxed into what I just said. But yeah, with that being said, we're gonna get into the next section of 2hollis' album production, which is his essential synth sound. And before I get into this, I want to mention that I'm going over the sound design for every single aspect of this kit, including the drums, the synths, the effects presets, all that kind of stuff in my next video. So if you want to learn all about 2hollis' sound design secrets, go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the video. I just want to mention that because I'm going to go through this pretty quickly and I'm not going to mention the sound design itself since there's going to be a full video on that. But yeah, I'm just going to start going through a sort of checklist of 2hollis' essential synth sounds. Now, all these things don't have to be used at the same time, but I've noticed them used all throughout his production, especially in his albums. The first of which is going to be some kind of FM bass pluck. I've noticed that especially his album production is very bassline heavy. There aren't a ton of melodic components that shine as heavily as the bass lines do. The melodic components like leads and plucks and stuff like that more so just support the bass line rather than acting as a main factor. So you're going to want to focus heavily on these bass lines is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, with these bass plucks, you're going to want to be playing a rhythmic pattern. None of these 2-bar long notes, straight shot kind of things. You know how I mentioned you don't want to have long drawn out notes for your bass pluck? Well, for the next aspect of your bass, you're going to want to do exactly that. I find that bass plucks typically don't really fill in that sub-frequency range how I like it to be in most of my beats. So I'll throw down some kind of underlying long sub-heavy bass. That's pretty much all I'll ever throw down in terms of bass. Like I said, it is a main component, but you don't really want to go too crazy with it. But yeah, with that aside, let's get into some melodic synth sounds. The first of which is going to be some kind of big ass super saw. And since the bass lines are only playing bass notes, they're not really going all over the place, lead patterns like these are a perfect way to introduce some kind of melodic variation. Now, if you're feeling like your track is missing or lacking energy, something you could throw down to really bring it to the roof is going to be some kind of fast, plucked arpeggio. Now, I just made this using the arpeggiator feature within FL Studio, and you could bring that up just by using Control A and adjusting the rate. But yeah, with that being said, I'm just playing basic triads, going based off of the bass notes of our bass line. That's a lot of bass. And don't worry, I'm going to cover exactly how I got that kind of glitch chopped effect later on in the video. And now the final essential synth sound that I'm going to cover is going to be reverbed supersaw basses. This sounds kind of weird and like it wouldn't work, but he uses these a lot, especially in songs like To You and It Will Never Be the Same.
I'll take my chance with you. I lost all my answers to you.
And I like to make use of these in downtime sections, intros, or just places where I need some kind of beat switch or it's low energy, so to speak. And now the last synth sound that I want to cover is considered optional because I haven't seen it used a lot in 2hollis' production, but I've personally used it to enhance the transients of my bass and kick sounds. And it's going to be some kind of laser sound effect or laser bass sound. And there's one included in my Supernova multi-kit, but they're pretty easy to make. I'll cover it in my sound design tutorial. But yeah, usually I'll just have it following my bass line or my kick pattern while throwing in some extra flares here and there. So with that being said, this is what some of those melodic components sound like in tandem with those drum sounds that we just covered. So now that we've covered the drums and the melodies, let's go over the next section of 2hollis' album production, which is his creative effects and techniques. And I'm going to cover 3 main effects that I notice a lot throughout his production, as well as one that I like to throw down just to make things more interesting. And the one that I like to throw down to make things more interesting is going to be Shaper Box. Now, one way that I see 2hollis use Shaperbox or Shaperbox adjacent plugins is just for sidechaining his bass and melodies. But another way you can make use of it is by using time or filter shaper presets to enhance your melodies. Like I mentioned earlier, the Supernova multi-kit has custom Shaperbox 3 presets, and they're all specifically designed for this purpose. So there's no filler, all of them sound good with these kind of melodies. But yeah, on that arpeggio that I mentioned earlier, I have this preset doing some stuttering and reversing, as well as some pretty heavy pan shaping, as well as this preset creating a laser sound on the 2 and the 4, kind of emulating a snare, and finally, just a standard sidechain. So without any of the Shaperbox presets, this is what the arpeggio sounds like. And with the Shaperbox presets, this is what it sounds like. Sounds a little bit funky without the drums because of the side chaining, but you get the point. It just enhances the melody so much and makes it much more interesting. Now, the second effect that I want to go over is going to be OTT, and I use it a lot on melodic components like synths or basses to make them sound more present and aggressive. I will advise you're going to want to turn down the depth quite a bit, as having it at 100% constricts your sound a lot. But yeah, just throw this down on anything that you feel needs to be more present in your mix. The next effect that I see him make use of a lot is going to be Hall reverb. And you can use this to make dry synth sounds sound much more big and grand, including those reverbed out super saw basses. And now the final effect that I see him make use of is just going to be standard delay. And this is used to introduce rhythm into sounds that there would otherwise be none. So for example, I have some 4th note delay on this Minecraft fireworks sound, staying true to the 2hollis style. And this kind of just makes it act as more than a sound effect. It now is a rhythmic component of the beat. So with that being said, that's going to completely cover the effects and techniques that he uses. So now let's get into the final and most important aspect of his production, which is his masterful arrangement. And I'm going to cover 4 main techniques that he makes use of to make his beats sound much more interesting and keep you captivated the entire way through. The first of which is going to be tempo changes and tempo rises and downfalls using automation. So in this section of the beat, I transition from being at 140 BPM to being at 160 BPM over here. Now, instead of having an abrupt tempo change, I make use of tempo automation during this build-up section to bring up the energy and make the change sound much more seamless. So if you have sections of your beat where the tempo is different, I heavily recommend making use of tempo automation, as not only is it going to make it a more smooth transition, but if you're going up in tempo, it's really going to bring up the energy right before that switch up. The second thing I recommend making use of is going to be build-up drum loops to build energy in your build-ups. Wow, a lot of builds too. Now this kind of breaches more into the like dubstep / trap territory, but they are incredibly effective for crescendoing that momentum and energy into a big ass drop. So don't be afraid to reach into different subgenres of EDM and pull inspiration from them, as that's the main thing that classifies 2hollis' production. Now, the third technique I recommend making use of is a bit more broad than the others, and that is to make every 8 bars of your track different somehow. Whether it be, like I mentioned earlier, with dispersing your drum patterns, introducing new melodies or melody variations using Shaperbox automation, or just changing up the pattern itself, throwing in some kind of sound effect, or just anything to create variation within your beat. This is incredibly important, as the aspects of our beat are pretty simple in and of themselves. The drums are pretty simple, the bass lines are pretty simple, the melodies are pretty simple, but when scattered throughout the beat using buildups and downtime of energy, it creates something that the listener wants to listen to the whole way through. So make sure every 8 bars you're doing something noticeably different, not just like making a snare a little bit louder or changing the sound of a hi-hat. Do something that the listener is actually going to recognize. And now the fourth and final arrangement technique that 2hollis makes use of a ton in his production is going to be the use of chops and stutters. And literally all you're gonna do is chop up your melodies or your drums or both using the slice tool. And something I recommend is throwing down some kind of sound effect during your chop or stutter. And the classic go-to for this kind of production is the Minecraft fireworks sound. And you could integrate these chops or stutters at the beginning of your pattern like this, at the end of your patterns like this, or you can merge the two by chopping up the end and the beginning of your pattern. So with that being said, that is going to completely cover everything you need to know about the genius of 2hollis' album production. I'm going to play a couple of my favorite sections of this beat that really encapsulate what we've talked about today, and try to pay attention and analyze it. See if you could pick out the techniques we covered today, like his drums, the synth sounds, the creative effects, and his arrangement techniques. So with that being said, if you're making use of everything we covered today, this is what your final product should sound like. So yeah, with that being said, that's going to conclude the tutorial. I really hope you guys learned something new today and enjoyed the tutorial. If you have any questions at all, throw them in the comments down below and I'll do my best to answer them. On top of that, remember to check out the Supernova multi-kit if you like the sounds that you heard in today's video. This is like aside from advertising and promotion, but it's genuinely my favorite kit that I've ever made, and it's inspired me to make some of my favorite beats I've ever made. So I definitely recommend checking it out. You will not be disappointed. Finally, consider subscribing as I post one tutorial a week and one sound kit a month. Other than that, that's going to be it.